What if events had unfolded slightly differently in Mark Webb's amazing Spider-Man series? Now, what if not only Peter got bit by the spider, but what if Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker got bit by the spider in The Amazing Spider-Man? Now, how would this affect the timeline as a whole? Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to a brand new Marvel's What If video. And in today's video, we're going to be welcoming Bit by the Spider series completely back to the channel. At the same time, we have been doing What If Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn got bit by the spider in Spider-Man 2002, but now we're going in depth with What If Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker got bit by the spider. Now, this is going to be a very interesting storyline. I'm very excited to finally dive deep, as I've been saving this one for a very long time. I've been saving this one for a rainy day, and I was like, you know what, I gotta finally finish this one. So that being said, my fellow watchers, I hope you enjoy. Do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on. If you guys are new to the channel, I highly recommend that you check out the other videos, as there's so much content coming out, it's absolutely insane. But that being said, my fellow watchers, let's dive in to today's video. Location: the Parker residence. Time: 5:02 a.m. Peter Parker had just sat upright from his bed after a nightmare. He checked his surroundings and body using the moonlight, which was filtered in by his window. Peter discovered that he was sweating profusely and his room was scattered as usual. Peter paused as the memory of the dream came back to him. When he had recollected half of them, he could predict the remaining half, as it was reoccurring in his nightmare. Peter had a dream about his parents leaving him yet again. There was nothing nightmarish about the dream, but anytime Peter saw his dad and mom run out through the door, it always broke him. Peter knew that he could not sleep again because he could not risk having the same nightmare, and more importantly, miss school. Aunt May always joked that Peter slept like a log of wood, and it always brought a smile to his face, like the one he was wearing now. Even though he knew that he could not sleep again, Peter knew that he could not stay in bed till school time. He was just wired differently. Peter could barely stay at a particular spot for an hour in class. He just wanted to keep moving. Deep down, Peter knew that this trait was a result of the heartbreak his parents inflicted on him. Peter did not want to dwell too much on it. He quickly jumped out of his bed and made his way out of his room. Peter had explored every nook and cranny of his house, but somehow the basement always seemed to have something new whenever he had checked it out. That was where he was heading to right now, and he wondered what treasures it held for him today. Peter had been searching for some time, but it did not matter to him, because he was really engrossed in his mini adventure. Peter was looking at some funny pictures of Aunt May and Uncle Ben when he saw it. A labeled box, Richard Parker. Peter was frozen for some seconds, and then he slowly made his way to the box. After he had reached it, he gently opened the box, and what he saw was worth his time. As Peter examined the contents of the box, tears gently dropped from his eyes. Suddenly, Peter saw a file with the name of Dr. Connors, and he started to do checklists on it. And he started to check its contents. Suddenly, Aunt May screamed his name, and in shock, he dropped the file. He quickly regained his composure and yelled back that he was on his way. Peter quickly carried the box back upstairs and dumped it on the table. Aunt May and Uncle Ben were shocked that he had discovered the box. Peter demanded an explanation, and for some moments, they were speechless. Peter pressed them again, and he finally got an answer. Uncle Ben was the person who answered him. He told Peter that, funny enough, he had the mind to give Peter the box that day, but Peter was having none of it. Peter was upset that he had kept his father's belongings from him, and he could not get angry at them. Peter then requested that he take a day off from school to go through the contents of the box. Uncle Ben was having none of it, but Aunt May quickly cautioned him. She told Peter that his request was granted, and he happily took the box and went into his room. That day, Peter discovered a lot of things, and he also did his research on Dr. Connors. Peter saw that Connors was trying to create a regenerative formula, and from what he saw, his research had been very futile. Peter did a little searching on his father's belongings, and he saw what he knew was the final piece of Dr. Connors' puzzle. Looking at the formula that his father had written out on the regenerative matter, Peter quickly pondered on what to do. Peter was torn between giving the formula to Dr. Connors or not to do anything about it. From what Peter had seen on the internet, Dr. Connors wanted to use the formula to help the diseased, war heroes, and the aged. Peter's gut feeling also told him that Dr. Connors was a good man. Another reason Peter also wanted to meet Dr. Connors was to find out more about his parents, because from what Peter had seen in his parents' belongings, Dr. Connors was close to his father. Peter decided that tomorrow after school, he would go and pay Dr. Connors a visit. He concluded that he would not tell Uncle Ben or Aunt May about his plan, because they would most likely stop him from going. When he had finally figured everything out, Peter wore his father's glasses and laid down on his bed. Before he started searching the box, he had discovered his father's glasses. Peter removed both glass parts of the glasses and put it on his own frame. Today was such a wonderful day for Peter, but somehow he could not help but think about what he had missed by not attending school today. What if I had gone to school today? Peter asked himself. Location, Oscorp facility. Time, 3:31 p.m. Few minutes after school, Peter was already in Oscorp. He hoped that nobody would notice that he did not belong here, but immediately the wish left Peter's heart. He saw Gwen Stacy. Peter thought that he could still get away from Gwen without her noticing him, but he was very wrong. Gwen spotted him right away and came rushing to him. Immediately, Gwen arrived. She started bombarding him with questions because she knew that he did not belong here. Peter quickly confessed and told her that he was trying to meet Dr. Connors. Gwen Stacy told him that it would not be possible. If you had come by yesterday, you would have had a chance to actually see him, Gwen told Peter, as she further explained that she was taking some people on tour throughout the facility today. Peter asked her what her job really was at the facility, and Gwen stated that she was an intern. Gwen then fired back a question for her own. She asked Peter why he was not around at school yesterday. Peter did not actually know how to react to the question, because he thought that nobody would really notice his absence. But Gwen, of all people, had noticed. As Peter was about to answer, Gwen was called by one of her superiors. She warned Peter not to go anywhere, sternly, and he quickly nodded his head, which made Gwen suspicious. After 1 minute, when Gwen finished attending her superior, she discovered that her suspicions were right. Peter was nowhere to be found. Location, Oscorp facility. Time, 4:13 p.m. Gwen was glad that she was on her free time, and she did not have to be a guide for students today. This meant that she had enough time to find out where Peter went to. In her hearts of hearts, Gwen honestly prayed that Peter would not have gotten into any trouble. Gwen really needed this internship for her career plans, and she could not allow anything or anybody to ruin it. With a frustrating grunt, Gwen continued searching, but with no results. She had searched 90% of the facility, but Peter was nowhere in sight. Gwen then made a mental check of where he could be, and she immediately gasped. She had not searched the experimental spider's room and the personal room where Norman Osborn was kept. Gwen immediately started running towards the spider's room and prayed with all of her being that Peter should not be there. If Peter had wandered into Norman's space, then she would definitely be in big trouble. Gwen finally arrived at the laboratory, but what she saw was not pretty. Peter was already in the lab, and Gwen started moving towards him. She had to get to him. She had to get him out as soon as possible. When she entered into the lab, she screamed Peter's name, and he suddenly turned as he was fascinated by the radioactive spiders. Gwen quickly grabbed his hand and started dragging him out, as she wanted him out of the facility immediately. Peter, however, wanted to stay, so out of reflex, he reached out widely in an attempt to grab anything. In the course of this, Peter grabbed a random glass crate, and it immediately fell and shattered. This startled the spiders, and they started raining down, even as the emergency alarms went off. Peter and Gwen were instantly bitten by the spiders, and if they had not run out of the lab, more bites would have followed. Immediately, they went out of the laboratory. Some Oscorp guards and personnel were already outside, as they were drawn in by the alarm. Gwen knew that she was in big trouble, but when Dr. Connors emerged from the growing crowd, she knew that she could not be in a big trouble. She knew that maybe things would be different. Dr. Connors quickly dismissed the crowd and took both of them to his office, even as he asked some scientists to arrange the lab which contained the radioactive spiders. When Gwen looked over at Peter, her anger grew more as she discovered that he was more than happy to finally be meeting Connors. The only thing that changed Peter's expression to fear was when all of them had entered Dr. Connors' personal lab, and Gwen slumped right in front of them. Dr. Connors and Peter were shell-shocked, and for a moment, as they did not know what to do, it was Connors that first broke the trance. He told Peter to carry Gwen to his lab bed, and he did. Connors then started examining Gwen, and he discovered that her body was burning up. Dr. Connors did not understand what was happening, but suddenly he finally got it. He asked Peter if they had gotten bitten by the spiders, and he answered in the affirmative. Dr. Connors wondered why nothing was happening to Peter, but he decided not to worry about that right now. Peter asked what was happening to Gwen, and Dr. Connors quickly explained everything to him. He sadly stated that Gwen would die, as there was no way of saving her life. Peter could not believe his ears. Peter knew there and then that he could not allow Gwen to die, because he would not be able to live with the guilt. Peter then suddenly remembered Connors' regenerative serum, and asked if he could not administer it to Gwen. Peter deduced that the serum would contract the radioactive spider's venom. Connors stated that his theory could work, but there was one problem. He had still not been able to drive the correct formula for the regenerative serum. Peter then remembered the main reason he had come to Oscorp's facility in the first place, his father's formula. He quickly opened his bag and gave it to Dr. Connors, who was in utter shock and surprise when he discovered who had the book. He asked Peter with raised eyebrows if he was Richard's son, and he hurriedly affirmed. Peter told Dr. Connors to focus on saving Gwen's life for now, that they would discuss other matters later, and the scientist quickly went to work. After he tried out the formula, and it was successful, he quickly created a serum. Dr. Connors was filled with so much happiness that he had finally done it. Connors was, however, apprehensive on testing the serum on Gwen, as he had not really conducted other necessary tests. Peter, however, was urging him on as Gwen did not have much time left. Dr. Connors looked at the girl, and he knew that it was true, as she was already almost dried up. "Okay, here goes nothing," Dr. Connors said as he injected Gwen with the serum. Location: Dr. Connors' house. Time: 8:36 p.m. Dr. Connors was now staring out of his window while reminiscing about the past few days. The serum had worked, and he was actually surprised that it did. Gwen was now okay. The serum had acted as a counter to the venom. One thing was, however, scary. The venom and the serum were at a constant war with each other. The result of this war was that Gwen's cells were consumed by the spider's venom like a cancer, but they were also regenerated by the serum. Dr. Connors did not know how much this battle would last, but from his calculations, it would go on till Gwen died a natural death. Even that would be difficult. Dr. Connors thought that he had examined both Peter and Gwen's powers, and the changes in their body had gone through. Peter now had superhuman speed, strength, and a web-crawling ability. He also possessed what they had funnily nicknamed the spider sense. The ability allowed him to sense impending danger and quickly react to it. Gwen, on the other hand, had all the powers that Peter did except the spider sense. However, due to the infusion of the regenerative serum, Gwen now possessed regenerative powers. Her body could literally heal itself at a very heightened rate. Dr. Connors had witnessed it firsthand, as her smoldering, dried-up body quickly refreshed and healed up after she had been injected with the serum. After further extensive examinations, Connors came to a conclusion that she could heal from anything as little as a paper cut to the loss of a limb or a body part. All these calculations, discoveries, and breakthroughs made Connors really happy. After everything, he had caught up with Peter, and he learned so much about him. Connors believed he had a very intellect mind like his father, and he was looking forward to spending more time with the boy. After the scary incident, Dr. Connors had taken Gwen home after some days. This was because he had to run some tests and observations on her and Peter. Connors had duly informed her parents about the situation so that they wouldn't get worried. It was easy to get rid of Gwen's parents' suspicions because when she woke up, Dr. Connors made the call and cooked up a story about an Oscorp research project. Peter knew that Aunt May and Uncle Ben would be very hard to convince due to his parents' connection with Oscorp, so he agreed to be coming regularly to Connors' lab. After everything, Dr. Connors had asked Peter to take Gwen home. Currently, Connors was about to inject himself with the formula. He deduced that if the serum did not have any negative effects on Gwen, that it might be okay for humans to use. He had already sent out word to his superior that he had finally succeeded, and he could not wait to be a living evidence. Dr. Connors figured that he would not be able to use Gwen as a public study for her own privacy's sake. What Dr. Connors did not realize was that Norman had eyes and ears everywhere in the facility, and within a few hours he would be called in for questioning. Without wasting much time, Connors injected himself with the serum and passed out. When he woke up in the morning, his lost arm had regrown, and his joy knew no bounds. Location: Norman's private room. Time: 3:04 p.m. Norman was lying down on his sick bed when Dr. Connors was brought before him. He told Connors that he knew everything that had happened, so it would not help him if he lied to him. Norman told Connors that he knew about Peter and Gwen's incident and their new abilities. Connors was shocked, and he looked around and discovered that he and Norman were alone. The entire room had been cleared. Norman told Connors that he had ordered everyone out because he did not want prying ears. Norman then went out to reveal the entire camera monitor system, which he used to spy on Connors. Dr. Connors gulped, because this meant that Norman saw and knew everything that he had done, even the embarrassing things. Norman sensed his discomfort and laughed, but as he did, he coughed up some blood. He then went on to state his demand. Norman told Connors that he wanted the formula because of his genetic disease. Dr. Connors instantly shook his head and refusal. Norman went on to offer him any amount of money he wanted in exchange, but Connors was not bulging. Dr. Connors told Norman to take his money with him to hell. He started lashing out at Norman, asking him how he expected him to save his life after he destroyed the life of his close friend, Richard. Dr. Connors beat his chest with his newly regrown hand and told Norman that there was no way he would give him the formula. Norman stared at Dr. Connors' newly grown arm greedily, and then suddenly he started laughing. Norman told Connors that it was funny that he was bringing up Peter, since the poor boy would lose both his guardians if he does not give him what he wants. Norman then clicked a button that started playing a live feed of Peter's home. Currently, it was being invaded by mercenaries. Dr. Connors was in total shock. "What's it going to be, Connors? Their lives or the serum?" Norman taunted. At this, Dr. Connors screamed in anger. This was when his transformation started taking place. Norman watched in shock and surprise as Dr. Connors transformed into a giant lizard. Norman knew that his life was surely over, as the reptile sized him up. But suddenly it seemed to remember something, and it broke out through the wall of a building. The green lizard landed on the road and gave the ground and the drivers the shock of their lives. However, it did not waste time to stare, as the reptilian took to its heels, en route to Peter's house to stop the assassins. After some time later, and a lot of upturned cars plus scared human beings on the road, the green lizard arrived at Peter's house. But it was already too late. Aunt May and Uncle Ben were slain. The lizard looked at their bodies and felt some sense of sadness, but the scream of Peter broke his trance. Peter was at the door of a semi-destroyed house, and from his point of view, the lizard had murdered Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Location: Gwen's house. Time: 9:08 p.m. Peter cursed under his breath as the window creaked when he closed it. When he had finished closing it, he removed his costume and laid on the bed. Peter looked at the tiles of the ceiling in fascination as he counted them. It had become a habit of his to fall asleep. While Peter was trying to get some sleep, he could not imagine how much his life had changed. A few weeks ago, he had snuck to Gwen's house. He would be committing burglary, but now here was home. After the death of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, whom Peter thought was murdered by the lizard, Gwen's parents had taken him in, like one of their own. Gwen had convinced them that they thought Peter was a good kid too. Ever since then, Peter had set out on his own revenge journey. Peter started patrolling the streets at night looking for the lizard, and because of this, he had started fighting other criminals he saw. A couple days later, he had a suit designed and made by him, plus web shooters which were made from his dad's watches. The city was now referring to him as a hero. They called him Spider-Man. The police, however, were having none of it, and Captain Stacy was at the forefront of the movement. Gwen was the only one that knew about Peter being Spider-Man, and she had started following him too. Peter did not like it at first because when he wanted to beat a criminal up and let out his pain, Gwen would try and stop him. Gwen approached the whole crime thing with love and kindness, and it always annoyed Peter. Peter tried to make a suit for Gwen, but it did not turn out really well. The media even made fun of it and dubbed her as the Web, because her suit funnily resembled one. The next day, when they had gone to check up on Dr. Connors, who had gone missing since Aunt May and Uncle Ben's death, they discovered a packed label for Gwen. When they opened it, they saw the most beautiful suit ever. It was in the color of white, and it had some kind of silky skin from the arms to the waist, which they quickly discovered was for gliding. After that, the joke-making of Gwen's suit stopped, but the name stuck. While remembering Gwen, Peter forgot the most important detail. They had started dating. He did not know what happened, but one night after crime fighting, while they were relaxing on top of a building, and Gwen kissed him. As Peter daydreamed about Gwen, he suddenly got knocked out of his window. It was her. Peter quickly got up and Gwen told him that the lizard had been spotted. Peter got suited up in an instant, and they made their way. Gwen told Peter that he was trying to transform the whole city into giant lizards. Peter could not let that happen, but most importantly, he had to get revenge for his guardians, Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Location, top of the tower. Time, 9:47 p.m. Norman had stormed the tower where the lizard was, and his men had subdued it, but at the cost of half their lives. They used tranquilizers, and now Dr. Connors was back in his human form. They quickly destroyed the equipment that he wanted to use to transform the whole city into lizards. Norman was on his last legs, and he knew that he did not have much time left. This was why he figured that he had to get Dr. Connors back in shape, to get him the serum. Norman did not want to transform into a lizard like Connors, so he needed Gwen and Peter too, to check how they survived without the consequences. He knew it would only be a matter of time before they showed up, and tried to save the day, and he was not wrong because they had arrived a few seconds after. Immediately they arrived, they were surrounded by Norman's men, and they were really confused. Dr. Connors screamed at them to get out, but Norman quickly silenced him. Norman called them by their names, which surprised them. Norman then told them not to worry, and that they can help themselves. Dr. Connors, however, was having none of it, so he screamed at Peter that Norman was the one responsible for the death of his parents, Uncle Ben and Aunt May. This had the desired effect on Peter, and he rushed Norman. Gwen had his back and started holding off the mercenaries. Peter jumped on Norman and started punching him, to his surprise. Norman laughed manically and with amusement while his mouth was bloodied by Peter. Norman told him that he did not think he had it in him. Norman told Peter that he thought that he was a weakling like his father, and that completely unleashed all his pent-up wrath. Connors, however, used the distraction to free himself. He needed another dose of his serum, but they had destroyed it by Norman. Because of Peter's assault, a vial had rolled over to him. But as he was about to inject himself, Dr. Connors saw Norman aiming a gun at Peter, who was completely blinded by rage. Connors quickly injected himself with the serum and pushed Peter aside. Even as he and Norman tumbled through the tower to the highway below, Connors started transforming mid-air, and he smiled because he knew that he would not die with Norman. He would just regenerate from his injuries. Norman then smiled back at him and shot him 4 times with his gun, while Peter looked frozen in shock, as he did not know that Dr. Connors was the lizard. Connors instantly transformed back to his human form due to the gunshots, and Norman's grin said it all. Norman had found an antidote for the serum, and he had made them into bullets. Connors saw his life flash before his eyes, and Norman's malice eyes, as the two men fell to their deaths. Location, cemetery. Gwen was worried about the discovery of Dr. Connors would do to Peter, but surprisingly, he was taking it very well. Peter said that Dr. Connors had no hand in Uncle Ben and Aunt May's death, so he was holding no grudges against him. Currently, they were paying their respects to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Peter came to their gravesite after the burial of Dr. Connors. "Want to know why I was so broken because of their death?" Peter asked Gwen, and she hastily nodded. Peter told her that on the day that they were killed, that he stormed out of the house after being scolded by Uncle Ben for his recent behavior. Peter told Gwen that Uncle Ben's last words still haunted him till this day. Uncle Ben had told him, "With great power comes great responsibility." When Peter had said this, he hugged Gwen and cried on his shoulders, and she finally understood everything. While Peter cried, Gwen prayed in her heart that Peter would learn to forgive himself and let go of the guilt, because it was not his fault. He could just not save everybody. After they were done, they went home in their spider suits. And that is going to be What If Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker were bitten by the genetically altered spider. What if Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy had got bit by the spider? It's a very interesting tale of, different things. I'm really glad, this is getting right back into the what ifs. We're going to be doing a part 2 that's going to be taking place in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because I know a lot of you guys really want a part 2. I want to make it happen. So we're going to make it happen on the channel. I'm really thankful that everybody's been enjoying the content. I've been trying to keep up, with school. There's so many things going on. I wish I could have made this longer, but I actually am very happy with how it turned out. We kind of got to the point, and I'm really glad on how the story turned out. Now, that being said, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. I do want to say, everybody, that I will be doing more videos on what if Peter, MJ, and Harry Osborn got bit by the spider, but there's also going to be another video that's going to be the interactive Marvel's What If on The Amazing Spider-Man that will be taking place during the alternate ending. So we're going to have 4 endings, but we're also going to be doing another one on what if Venom had killed Spider-Man. So there's going to be 4 alternate Spider-Man 3 endings, so there's a lot of content coming out, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man 4 video, all the way through 10, so there's so much content that will be released soon, and I cannot wait to get into it. I'm super excited. We got Marvel Spider-Man 2 coming out. There is so much happening, but thank you so much for tuning in and enjoying the video. I want to give a big, massive shout out to John Art Palco for making the thumbnail possible. It's such an amazing thumbnail. If you guys actually do want to buy these thumbnails, do make sure to check out the Patreon, because the Patreon has a shop now where you can get a lot of the downloadable content. You can get, the scripts, anything that you want to get from the Missed the Part channel is most likely going to be at the shop. So do make sure to check out the Patreon. Also, there's brand new tiers where you can work with me on the channel, so that's going to be out. It's actually out right now. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have a fantastic day. Peace out.